Good morning and welcome to our first session in our mini lecture series. So we're trying something new. So what we're going to be doing this week is chunking out our review of the different ways of documenting your observations, right? So at this point in the course, we typically would be doing some review of what we've talked about so far. And we know from research that we have about 12 minutes in terms of the ability to focus on new content, listen to content. And so I am looking at having 5 15 to 20 minute sessions reviewing these topics over the course of the week. I am recording these sessions at 8 in the morning, and you are welcome to join me. I have sent out invitations, so if you would like to join me live, you can. Otherwise, these are all being recorded and will be posted. So today we're going to be talking briefly about formal and informal assessment and what that looks like. Tomorrow we will be reviewing developmental checklists and rating scales. On Wednesday, we will be talking about anecdotal notes and running records. Thursday, time event samples and tallies. And on Friday, we'll be diving deeper and looking at specific formal assessment tools, both for ongoing assessment and screening. And these all line up with the final assignment, which is your child development portfolio, right? So you will be choosing 5 of these methods to be documenting observations that you have completed of children. You will be picking a specific domain for each of these. So for example, if you wanted to do health and physical development for developmental checklists, perhaps you might do with a work sample, perhaps you might focus on cognitive. Perhaps with the anecdotal note, you might focus on language and literacy, right? The other rule in picking your 5 out of these 6 is that you can only choose to do a formal assessment tool, to include a formal assessment tool if you are using one in your program. And that takes us to thinking about, okay, well, what exactly is formal and informal assessment? So formal observations are observations that you are documenting using a formal tool that is based upon research, that is professionally developed. Typically, you have to purchase the assessment tool, and you need to be trained on that tool, which again is why in order to include that in your portfolio, it needs to be something that you're using in your program. So some examples of formal assessment tools that a lot of programs use: Teaching Strategies Gold, that goes along with the creative curriculum, is a formal ongoing assessment tool that many programs in DC use. The CORE, C-O-R, is the formal assessment tool that goes along with the high scope curriculum. So you may have heard of that. In terms of a formal screening tool, the Ages and Stages questionnaire is an example of that. And again, on Friday, we'll dive a little bit deeper into those. But know that as you're pulling together your portfolio, you can only use formal observation if you're using a tool in your program and have been trained on it. Now, informal observation is really the observation that you're doing every day, all day long, right? Where we're observing children, we're paying attention to what we see, what we hear, and really thinking about what does that demonstrate in terms of what the child knows and is able to do. And so things like checklists, rating scales, time event samples, anecdotal notes, running records, all of the things that we're going to be talking about, and all of the other items in our list that go in the portfolio are all considered informal observation strategies. Okay. And so as we think about that, I just wanted to show a couple of slides that we have looked at previously in the semester. Right, so when we think about the purposes of assessment, we have screening, which again, screening, we typically would use a formal assessment tool such as the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which is then used to determine whether we want to refer a child for additional screening and evaluation for special education services or early intervention. Ongoing assessment, or assessment in general, sometimes we just refer to it as assessment, which is in the red here, is what you are typically doing every day. And that's where you're really tracking and documenting children's progress over time. And you're using that information in terms of what children know and are able to do to set goals and make decisions about your curriculum and lesson planning. There are also program assessment tools like the CLAS and the ITERS that help us to think about program planning, help us to think about quality improvement, right? So as we're thinking about informal and formal assessment, we all also have to really be thinking about what is the purpose of any specific assessment practice, any specific way of documenting our observation, right? And for the most part, as we are looking at these different strategies, particularly with informal, but also with formal, but like anecdotal notes, running notes, time event samples, tallies, that we're really looking at children's behavior over time. We're looking at what it is that a child knows and is able to do. And we're using that information to support planning, to support our thinking about interactions with young children, activities, and materials. You might also want to think about this in terms of the video that we've watched a number of times. We've watched it in class. I also included it in the discussion. I'll let it start here quickly. So this should look familiar. So as we go through this video, remember it talks about the different kinds of observation, right? That it needs to be ongoing, it needs to focus on the whole child, it needs to be naturalistic in terms of that you are observing children doing things they typically do in settings that they typically spend time with, people that they typically spend time with. That you're doing it from multiple perspectives, and that's also why it's important that you're documenting your observations using several different strategies, and that it's useful so that you're using your observations and your assessment data to support planning. Right? Which is also summarized in this slide here. So that ends our mini lecture on formal and informal observation. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you again tomorrow. Have a great day.